All right. Look, yesterday we were talking about political culture, the broad set of values that everybody can agree on in the country, and there are distinct things we can agree on. For example, we use the analysis, or the analogy that we could all agree that ice cream's good. Okay, most Americans would tell you ice cream's good. But when we start saying, like, what's the preferred flavor of ice cream, like Jesse, it's your last bowl of ice cream ever in the whole universe. What are you picking? What are you going to be eating? Chocolate. Rydell, what flavor of ice cream are you going to get if it's your last bowl ever? Okay. It's not bad. It's still a respectable choice. What about you, Paul? Fair enough. Fair enough. We're going to get different choices on that because we're all different people. The more specific you get on an issue, okay, the more varied your responses are going to be. And like, here's an example of that in political terms. We agree that liberty's good, right? Freedom is good. Okay. So watch this, Maggie. I bet you'll have an opinion on this. Does a woman have the right to choose to have an abortion? All right, you're like, oh, we got some insta yeses over there. That's part of liberty, right? All right. Does anybody think that that's an absolutely ridiculous idea that should not be part of a woman's liberty? Nobody's going to take the opposing view, or they just don't want to say it out loud. Rydell, you look like you want to say something. Okay. Yeah. See? All right. Now we got two differing views on that. We all agree that liberty's good, but when we get into specifics, there's disagreement. Okay? And that's going to happen politically. Now, these values that we talked about yesterday that are broad values, that political culture that we can agree on, that comes through family. Remember, your family's going to have a big impact. It comes through school, educational institutions. We're teaching you things, okay? And it comes through religious institutions. Your three major world religions, particularly here in the United States with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they're teaching you certain things. Like, for instance, all three major religions have a set of rules that its adherents, its followers have to go by. And so we say, look, that's significant to us. We reflect that in what we do politically. Okay? Now, finally, last but not least, mass media. Okay? Your television, your radio, your music, your books, culture in general passes on not just regular values, but political values. Okay? For instance, like in political values, media all the time. I gave you an example in the video yesterday. When I was a kid, G.I. Joe, the cartoon, they would pass on certain values. And look, even in the cartoon itself, I know you all. Did anybody ever watch G.I. Joe growing up? No, it's kind of way before your generation. But there's always good guys versus bad guys, and nobody ever dies. They're shooting lasers at each other all the time. Stuff gets blown up, but nobody ever dies in the show because human life has meaning, and we kind of want to convey that to an extent. Right? There are always life lessons. Music, sometimes music. Can you think of any political music over the last 10, 15 years in your lifetime? What's an example? Oh, absolutely. Black Lives Matter is a good example, but even country music. God bless the USA. How many of you all are like, I love it, it gets me right here every time. All right. Some people are like that. And it's passing on a lot of values and culture. Okay. Sometimes not political either. Now, we want to get into those specifics now. Okay. Political culture, the broad stuff we agree on. Now, let's talk about political ideology. That's something different. All right. And a good working definition for political ideology, it's a specific set of beliefs that people have about government and politics. Okay. That might be something you want to write down, just throwing that at you. Political ideology, all right, that's a specific set of beliefs that people have, okay? A specific set of beliefs that people have about government and politics. A specific set of beliefs that people have about government and politics. And there are a couple of these major belief systems that we're going to talk about, okay? In America, there's really two big ideologies, all right? And we'll talk about a few others, but there's two big ideologies. One, liberalism, and the other, conservatism, okay? Those are our two big belief systems. We're going to start with liberalism. And anybody know what it means to be a liberal or to believe in liberalism? It's tough to put a definition on it. Like, you can usually identify what you believe or the examples of things that liberals believe, but it's difficult to really pin a definition on that. Anybody want to give it a shot? It's all right if you don't know this. Is why we're here. We fill the gaps in your knowledge. All right. Liberalism is a belief system that emphasizes individual rights and equality. It emphasizes individual rights and equality and progressing in society. Okay? It emphasizes individual freedoms and equality and progressing as a society. Right? And that's really a broad definition, but we're going to look at specific beliefs that people have who say, I'm a liberal. Right? I believe in liberalism. I believe it's the right way in terms of government. Right? Over here, Maggie's already, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, you're probably somebody who's a liberal. You're like, yeah, I'm cool with that. Anybody else like, I'm definitely a liberal? If you don't know, you'll find out. Losh, you need me to repeat something? Sure. Liberalism is a political belief system that emphasizes individual freedoms, equality, and progress in society. You're welcome. Okay? Now, let's talk about a few things, some beliefs of them. And we're going to take both major ideologies and we're going to break them up into economic positions and social positions. Okay? And we're going to start with economic positions. The first thing here, let's talk about this, and I promise we'll connect it to economics in a minute. Liberalism, they believe that government has a certain role to play in society. Okay? They believe that government should be responsible for helping individuals, actively intervening in society and helping individuals. Okay? That's part of what they think the role of government is to intervene and help out people. Like, here's a for instance. During the corona pandemic, when it started last year, what did the government do for every adult in America? What is it? Stimulus checks, $1,200 stimulus checks. The government said people are in need. We need to help people out right now. Okay? We're going to give everybody $1,200. All right? There's a need. Government's going to take care of it. That's the government's job, to help out individuals. All right? So they believe that the government, one, should help out individuals, and the government should also intervene when the economy's not doing well. Okay? So the government has a role to play in your individual life and in the economy. All right? Ooh, should the government be so active? That's a good question. Okay? Now, speaking in terms of economics, I want to show you a picture of a guy. Most of you probably have never heard of this guy. You don't need to remember his name, but you need to remember his ideas. Yes, his lips and mustache are way oversized for his face. This guy's named John Maynard Keynes. Okay? And Keynes is an economist, or was. He's dead now. Okay? And Keynes had some ideas that liberals really liked. All right? So let me show you something. This is what we refer to as like the business cycle, how economy and businesses go over time. Okay? And so a lot of economists have put together this idea, and here's what happens according to them. You can see the green line that it's talking about the level of output for businesses, that businesses who are fairly successful over time, what's going to happen is they're going to put out more. They're going to make more money. They're going to produce more. But eventually, the economy's not always going to be good. There's usually a downturn. Okay? Downturn doesn't go quite as low, and it usually comes back up. And it's a natural cycle. Okay? Where businesses learn from their mistakes, they get better, they produce more over time. All right? And Keynes said, look, when we get to these low points, these dips right here, are what economists call a trough. When you get to those low points where the economy's not doing well, that's when the government should get involved. The government should be spending tax dollars trying to help the economy get out of this low point. Okay? And we refer to that as the Keynesian idea or the Keynesian principle. Okay? Where the government should spend money to get us out of economic danger. Right? That's your tax dollars working. Okay? That liberals believe, hey, this idea, when things are tough, like with the coronavirus, that the government should be spending more money. What did they do for people for their unemployment benefits? They added an extra $600 onto their unemployment benefits because they said people are in trouble. All right? So people need help. The economy was at a low point last year. You had people losing their jobs left and right. Businesses weren't allowed to open. So they said, look, we need to get involved. Okay? And liberals said, this is a good idea. This is why government's here. Okay? Anybody feeling like so far you're like, oh gosh, I like this. Oh, this Keynes guy, he's onto something. Maybe, maybe not. All right? So look, Keynes said, hey, ultimately we got to help out. We got to spend money. And he used a term, and you can just keep this in the back of your head. If you use a lawnmower before, you know this, the expression prime the pump. Have you guys heard that before? If you use a lawnmower, on the side there's a little bulb, and you push it a couple times, and what it does, it takes a little bit of the gasoline and puts it in the engine so that ultimately helps it start quicker. All right? And it's kind of like a defibrillator. When somebody's heart stops, you jump start them. I'm like, look, I've always wanted to use one of those machines, but if your heart stops, I'm going to be a little bit sad about that. Okay? But I would like to use one of those machines. Anyone want to volunteer? Just kidding. All right? So look, prime the pump. That's what Keynes said we should do. Now, role of government should be helping out people, intervening in the economy. What would liberals say about tax policy? Who should bear the brunt of taxes? The wealthier people and wealthier corporations, okay? In terms of their tax policy, liberals would say, look, wealthier people need to bear the burden of our taxes. They should pay higher rates because the country's been good to them. They've made money off of our system. They've benefited. They should pay a higher tax rate. If Wiley's making $100 million a year, then she should pay a higher percentage of her income than, say, Jesse over here, who's only making $30,000 a year. Yeah, but apparently they hung up. Oh, they didn't. All right. So ultimately, their tax policy is, hey, the burden should fall on the wealthier people. Okay. Now, good. All right. Next, we got social programs. Okay. Liberals believe that a lot of our tax dollars should best be spent on social programs. These are programs to help out people who are vulnerable or in need. Okay? Now, an example of social programs, here are a couple key examples. These three programs make up the bulk of what America spends every year. Okay? Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Those three programs we spend over half of our budget every year on these three programs. Medicare, health insurance for who? Old people, senior citizens. Medicaid, health insurance for low-income Americans. And Social Security is a retirement pension. All right? Old people get really excited when they turn 65 because they qualify for Medicare and Social Security. All right? Your tax dollars pay for these. Can you think of anyone and we look at society like liberals say, hey, old people in particular are vulnerable. You're going to be the most sick, the most ill when you get really old. All right? Can you think of why someone would object to these programs in principle? Why would somebody say, yeah, we shouldn't be paying tax dollars to give health insurance to old folks? Is it because they hate old people? Wiley. That's a little heartless, but yeah. Let me give you an example here. Okay, somebody who would be on the opposite side of a liberal, somebody who's conservative, would say, look, senior citizens, we care about old people. All right. However, if you want money for health problems when you're old or you want a pension, what should you do? Not necessarily be rich, but you should start doing what? Save your money. Okay? You're responsible for that on your own. Or if somebody wants to help you by paying your hospital bills, it should be from charities because charities can't force you to give money to them. All right? That ultimately, like for example, maybe right now, like I hate to say it, but what if I died tomorrow? I've been paying into Medicare for, 25 years now. I'll never get a dime out of it. It would have been nice if I'd have gotten to keep my tax dollars and I could have given more stuff to, say, my nephews. All right. And so it's not that people don't care about low income people or old people. They're just saying, hey, whatever happened to some individual responsibility? That if you want something, like if I want health insurance, either A, I need to keep my job for longer, or B, I can pay for it myself. All right. It's not that other people don't care about these groups. So don't misunderstand that. And I'm not saying you have to be a liberal or be a conservative. So social programs, a large part of the spending. All right. Also under social programs that we spend a lot of money on that liberals tend to like, things like welfare programs. Okay. Welfare programs, when we say that, that's a whole slew of things, like housing programs. What we call food stamps is actually referred to as SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. No, you don't need to know the acronym, okay? But those programs to help out people who have financial need. There are clothing vouchers, WIC, Women and Infant Children, programs to help with that. Pell Grants, if you fall below a certain income level, you can get money for college. All that money comes through what we refer to as welfare programs. All right? Liberals, what do you think they think of welfare programs? They're good. Okay? These have all been implemented by liberals saying that this is good. We need to help out these vulnerable people in society. Because children, young children in particular, it's not their problem. They were just born in this situation. Right? Why would somebody object to this? Why would somebody object to, say, WIC, Women and Infant Children? You put yourself in that position that largely this stuff is a choice. You don't want kids. There's a way to prevent that. All right. You know what? If you're poor, why don't you work your way out of that? A lot of people also object too, because anytime the government's involved in something like this, even if you had it as a private organization, a charity, what do people always try to do to the system? Abuse it, scam it, find a way around it. By the way, the federal government always investigates to see how much money they're being defrauded, and it's in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars every year. That's a lot of money. Okay? So liberals look, the government should be helping the economy, okay, when it's in trouble. It should be helping people when they're individually in trouble. Let's talk about their thoughts on defense and military spending. Right? What would a liberal say about spending money on the military and defense? I mean, it's good. They obviously, everybody wants to have a strong military. But do they think we should be spending more money on the military or less? Less. They're like, hey, the United States spends way too much money on the military. Right now, we spend about $800 billion a year on the military, which is 6 times more than any other country. China's second on that list, and we're totally outspending them. All right. And that doesn't mean that necessarily you have to agree with that, but it's just saying that it's a pretty high expenditure. And liberals think, hey, instead of spending money on the military, where could we be spending money? Where should the government be spending money? Education programs, for instance. More programs like this, things that help individual people within our country. All right. Let's talk about labor and unions. Ooh, not trying to insult your intelligence, but can you tell me what a labor union is? Better working conditions, benefits. Right. It's when employees of a particular industry band together to make demands of their employer. Okay, like teachers, we have a teachers union, or miners, the United Mine Workers of America. It's a labor union. Okay, those people form together a giant group, and they say, "Hey, we're going to make sure we get treated fairly." Do you think liberals would support unions or no? Oh, yes, they absolutely support labor unions. They say, look, these are regular people who've been exploited by big business owners, and these are people just trying to get a decent living. All right. Wait a second. Do business owners sometimes exploit their employees? Definitely. You look at American history and look at coal mining. People who worked in coal mines were exploited for a long period of time. And only because they formed labor unions did, a lot of miners actually succeed in gaining certain things like an 8-hour workday, benefits, days off, things like health insurance as part of their compensation. Okay. So they think it's a good thing. How about this? Do you think minimum wage, what would a liberal say about minimum wage? What should we be doing with minimum wage? We should be raising it. A liberal would say, look, regular common folks who maybe aren't the brightest person in the world, but are still capable workers, shouldn't have to endure a life of poverty just because they're not super smart. And they look at a situation like, let's look at Walmart. Okay, Sam Walton, the guy who started Walmart, when he died, he split up his fortune among his 6 children. Each of them is still a billionaire, even though they didn't start the business at all, and they've split up the fortune multiple ways. What does a Walmart employee make on an hourly basis? It's minimum wage, and they told me, somebody first mod today told me that it was approximately, they were making $12 an hour, and I can't remember why they said they got that, but it's not a lot, okay? Now, in that particular regard, people are like, hey, you got the people who are doing all the hard work, all the manual labor making $12 an hour, when some CEO or business owner who's really the child of the original owner is making millions and billions of dollars a year for doing nothing. And they're like, that disparity, that gap between the high man and the low man is too great. And they're not suggesting that your regular Walmart employee make as much as the CEO. But what they're saying is there shouldn't be that big a gap between their salaries. Okay? That's one measure that a lot of people use now for their companies. Like, what's the gap between your average employee, your lowest paid worker, and your CEO, who's typically your highest paid worker? All right? That's what they think towards labor and towards unions. By the way, these things together, like the liberal economic positions, what socioeconomic group do you think they would appeal to? Lower, middle, or upper class? The lower and middle classes. Okay, these are definitely more your blue collar workers to an extent. When we say blue collar, we mean like your laborers, people who are not exorbitantly wealthy or involved in a lot of manual labor. Okay, these are liberal economic positions, right? Somebody who's a liberal would say, should the government be responsible for providing health care to all Americans? What would they say about that? Absolutely. They're thinking, yeah, the government has a responsibility to make sure that people don't go without health care. Because we don't want poor Riley going to the hospital and she's like, I don't have health insurance. I can't afford it. That's terrible. What if she needed a heart transplant? You don't need a heart transplant, do you? Okay, I would feel terrible if you really did. Okay, so ultimately, she's like, I can't afford this procedure that I need. That would be awful. And nobody in the United States of America, a liberal says, nobody should be able to, nobody should have to endure that. And that doesn't mean that conservatives are heartless, pun intended. Okay, it just means conservatives say, well, look, maybe it's not the government's place to be doing that. Maybe if we want poor Riley to get a heart transplant or whatever procedure she would need, that charity should get involved. Okay, that's the role. That's their role. All right. Let's go over to the social side of things. All right. Let's talk about some social views of liberals. This is people get really fired up about their social issues. All right, they get real, like you start talking about things like abortion, and they're like, ugh. First one we'll hit up though. We won't go to abortion first. LGBT issues, including same-sex marriage. What's liberal stance on that? They're like, it's okay. This should be an acceptable lifestyle. This should be an acceptable lifestyle that people accept. All right, and liberals have actually made a great deal of progress on certain things. Like I tell students, when I was in high school, I graduated high school in 1997, and if you'd have said in 1997 that same-sex marriage would be legal in all 50 states and all federal territories, I'd have been like, no way. Like society just wasn't there. They've changed the dynamic. Okay, what would, and this goes along with it, but it's an issue that's being debated in the court system right now, is what should schools' policies be on transgender restrooms? What would a liberal say? Whatever they identify as, that's the restroom they use. That ultimately we're about protecting that individual, a vulnerable, marginalized group. Okay? And by the way, I'm not telling you that you have to be liberal or that you have to accept these positions, so please don't go thinking that either. All right? So that, LGBT issues, all right? And now I know that, they add other letters to it. They're trying to be more inclusive in that, so please don't harp on me for that. But that's what liberals think, okay? That's their position, that this is more normal than what people have accepted in society and human history, and that we should continue this policy. Okay? Let's talk about the environment, man. What would liberals say about the environment? We've got to protect the environment, that we're using up our natural resources too quickly, and what's happening when we burn fossil fuels? It's going into the air and we're ruining the environment. Okay? Our use of fossil fuels is ruining the environment. Climate change is not only real, but it's caused by human beings. Ooh, man. Now, look, I would say this climate is definitely changing. Temperatures, world temperatures, like literally the last 20 years, every year has been one of the 20 hottest years on record in human history. So, the climate's changing. The real question is, what's causing it? There are some people who believe that we can't say definitively that this is man-made. But liberals look at this and all the scientific data says greenhouse gases, the CO2 output, the burning of fossil fuels, we're contributing to making the earth a hotter place. The good news for us is we'll all be dead by the time it becomes uninhabitable. That was a joke. Tough room. Tough room. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about something less controversial, abortion. All right, this has been a political issue in America for the last 100 years. What's the liberal position on abortion? Why should it be allowed? You're right. They definitely support abortion in terms of women being allowed to do it, but why? They see it as a right. Look, you have to realize this too. Most liberals would tell you they're not saying that abortion is a good thing, okay? It's not like they're advocating for abortions to happen. But they look at abortion and say, hey, ultimately, women should have the right to choose what to do with their own body, okay? And trust me, we'll get to the conservative side of that later on. But they're like, hey, bodily autonomy is important, that we don't want people telling us what we can and can't do with our own bodies, right? Now, there is some room for the other side of that argument there, but we're going to leave it at that for a moment. All right, that women especially liberals in general, but women are pro-choice. That women should have the choice. It should be up to them, right? And that's a good place for us to stop at the moment because we don't want to get too far ahead of the game.